Right. So hello everyone. We are meeting you with unit number 8, the future of work challenges and controversies today. So we have come a long way in this lecture series, isn't it? We have discussed a lot of new concepts, right? Many new ideas related to this new concept of economy, the digital economy, and how things have changed with the emergence of innovations and how digital transformations are creating changes everywhere. So today our focus is going to be on how this concept has transformed the landscape of work, right? What sort of challenges and what sort of controversies have emerged as a result of these transformations, as a result of the emergence of digital, so to speak, right? And how will it shape the future of work? So we will be looking at this kind of area today in detail, right? So first, let's take a look at our learning outcomes at the end of this chapter, what we intend to achieve, right? So we are going to understand the various forms of challenges and controversies posed by the sharing economy. Now, you already know what the sharing economy is, so I'm not going to go into detail into explaining what it is once again. So you all can refresh your memory by looking at our previous videos where we have spoken in detail, in depth regarding the sharing economy. So in this sharing economy, various forms of challenges have emerged, especially with reference to work, right? The nature of work and all that. So we will take a brief look at how this landscape has changed in the sharing economy. It's true that it does offer many opportunities and there are many advantages that the sharing economy can pose to all the participants involved, but also how can it create certain challenges at the same time, right? Let's take a look at that. And also, secondly, explain the concept of offshoring and distinguish the opportunities and challenges posed by offshoring. Now, one of the forms of these challenges, now I talked about these challenges and controversies that are emerging because of the sharing economy. So one way around which these challenges and controversies emerge is through this concept of offshoring, right? We will be looking into in-depth towards this concept, and we will see how offshoring gives birth to certain new opportunities and to both workers, to enterprises, right, to nations maybe as a whole, and even certain challenges that is caused by the concept of offshoring. Then thirdly, describe the characteristics of the second machine age and review its pros and cons. Now, we talk about this era called the second machine age, where we talk a lot about automation, right? And we talk about robotic process automations, we talk about machine learning, right? So we talk about a lot of such concepts. And in this second machine age, we're going to understand what it is and the sort of advantages and disadvantages or the challenges that it has given rise to. Then fourth one, explain how the new markets have caused changes in labor markets. Now, the nature of work has changed, the way how work affects laborers have changed, the nature of the labor market itself in the way we learned in our traditional economics lessons have changed because of this new economics and the new marketplaces. So we are going to take a look at that as well. Then the next one, explain how the sharing economy has revived a generalist workforce. Now, we say that no longer we can identify people who are strictly specific to a certain profession only, right? So the way of measuring work has changed largely, as well as what constitutes as work or what is passable as work has changed in itself. At the same time, there's this new generation of generalists emerging as well, right? So we are going to take a look at this emerging generalist workforce that has been activated due to the sharing economy. Then explain how new marketplaces have given birth to more granular forms of labor supply. Now the labor supply, unlike the earlier times, has also changed, right? It has sort of gotten broken down into smaller units of work that are engaged by people, right? So we sometime back talked about 8 to 5 jobs with very much specific job descriptions and so on. But when it comes to the present, it has changed. So we are going to take a look at how it has changed, right? Then understand the concept of task economies and explain how taskification is operationalized, right? So we talk about the task-oriented economies or task economies in the modern age. So we are going to introduce that concept to you, and we are going to look at how the concept of taskification becomes activated in the modern economics, right? Then finally, we are going to explain how the new economy has activated invisible work and review the challenges posed by the sharing economy to the existing economic measures. Now, this is also important. Work is no longer very much visible and traceable sometimes. There are ambiguities in identifying what is work actually and how you can detect work in these modern markets, right? So there are these concepts of invisible work that has emerged in the new economies. So we are going to take a look at that, as well as we are going to take a brief insight into the challenges posed by the sharing economy, which has caused certain, changes to the existing economic measures, or which has prompted for the existing economic measures to make certain changes in their traditional ways, right? Okay, so first things first, let's first try to take a look at what sort of changes have been effectuated in the sharing economies due to these, new markets, new models and technologies and so on, right? So first, let's take a look at the introduction. Here the first point says, many people casually assume that the critical labor market distinction is and will remain between highly educated, or in other words, highly skilled people, and less educated or less skilled people. Now, still, even you and I may at certain times, we assume that the distinction or this differentiation within the labor market is between skilled labor and unskilled, or let's say less skilled labor most of the time, right? But this has been increasingly this view has started to become wrong lately, right? Now that's what the next point says, that this view can carry mistakes. It may be mistaken. So here, as an example, we have related the case of Uber drivers in the USA, right? So this is something which happened several years back in the USA. What happened was actually, there was a complaint made by the Uber drivers, right, in a court of law, that the Uber Incorporation does not recognize them as actual laborers of the organization, right? Instead, they treated the drivers as contractors. And when they are being treated as contractors, what is the disadvantage they have? They are not given the benefits that many permanent employees or many actual employees of the organization are entitled to, right? They don't have any safety net, so to speak. They don't have any security or insurance from the part of the company, like the benefits that a usual employer receives right, are most of the time not received by contract-based employees. But what these employers tried to highlight was some of these drivers, what these drivers tried to highlight was some of they actually full-time worked for Uber, right? Not like someone who would, be engaged in a daytime job, some other job, or an enterprise, employed in some other enterprise, and do Uber as a part-time. Not like that. Some of these people were actually full-time committed to Uber, right? So there was a debate that happened in this scenario. How to classify employment in this case? Can we recognize drivers as employees, right? And there was this whole debate going on in the US. This was back in 2014, 15, like, right? During that age, this discussion was operationalized, right? So let me share you a short, interesting video clip which explains the context of this problem, so that at the introduction, you get a better understanding about how the nature of these sharing economies or platform-based economies have sort of created certain dilutions in boundaries in work, or let's say certain ambiguities in the nature of work, right? So let me share that with you.
Time for both Uber, Lyft, Postmates, DoorDash, and a lot of companies in the sharing economy space.
It almost seems to me like they're digging their heels into a business model that is in and of itself.
Contract work may be changing for both the workers and the tech companies that rely on it. California just passed Assembly Bill 5, a law that could completely upend the gig economy by reclassifying many independent contractors as employees, a huge step towards a new labor model across the country. Hundreds of thousands of contract workers in California are set to become employees, threatening the business models of ride-hailing companies like Uber and Lyft and a host of other companies. Vina Dubal is a labor law professor at the University of California, Hastings, who has studied the taxi industry and the gig economy for over a decade.
In the first years of the gig economy, things were okay. But over the last 5 years, they've lowered income for drivers. These companies unilaterally set prices, and they unilaterally drop prices, and they unilaterally decide that drivers are going to make even less of the fare than they were before.
Under the new law, drivers could be entitled to benefits like a minimum hourly wage and workers' compensation. But the question for workers is, will those benefits come at the cost of flexibility? Will part-time drivers be forced to become employees and start working scheduled shifts? While some Uber and Lyft drivers fear they could lose flexibility as an employee, others like Idan Alva welcome the protections. Alva moved to the U.S. from Israel almost 20 years ago and worked as a corporate security manager in the Bay Area. He started driving for Lyft part-time 4.5 years ago to make a little extra money on his long commute. Then he lost his job and was forced to start driving full-time to support himself and his son. He currently drives for Lyft and Zoom, a rideshare specifically to take children to and from school.
My rates today are about half of what they were when I started 4 years ago. Every day it feels like a Russian roulette, because the chances of something happening, maybe something small and annoying like another flat tire, maybe something bigger like a car accident, maybe something devastating like getting injured in a way that I cannot work. It's all there. And if that happens, I have no safety network.
AB 5 will require companies that want to treat a worker as a contractor to prove 3 things: that the worker isn't controlled by the company, that the work isn't part of the company's core business, and that the worker has their own independent enterprise. Uber and Lyft told us this could force them to raise costs and wait times for riders and significantly reduce the amount of drivers they employ. Lyft also told drivers in a message that they may soon be required to drive specific shifts, stick to specific areas, and drive for only a single platform. Uber said it plans a legal challenge, arguing that drivers are not part of their core business. Bradley Tusk was an early investor and consultant for Uber who helped the company successfully oppose minimum pay and other ride-hailing rules in New York.
When I was investing and working with Uber back in the early days, it was envisioned as something that people would do in their spare time to make a few extra bucks, not as their full-time living. There are a subset of drivers in some really big cities where it very much is their full-time job, and so it's problematic, it's expensive. It's problematic because fundamentally the business wasn't designed for that.
The two companies say they have more than 500,000 combined drivers in California, and that the majority of them drive less than 20 hours a week. They say that drivers take home more than 70% of fares, but economists have estimated Uber and Lyft drivers earn on average between $9 and $16 an hour, after accounting for gas, maintenance, and other expenses the contractors are responsible for. Many part-time drivers fear AB5 could make it worse, and by forcing them to drive scheduled shifts, it would wipe out the flexibility they need. Alva recently started organizing Lyft and Uber drivers and has been active at demonstrations in support of AB5. He often talks to drivers while waiting for rides in the parking lots at the airport.
So you saw in the video how Uber got in the middle of a litigation because of this controversy of how to identify their drivers. I mean, like how to classify their drivers inside this business model, right? So there have been a debate going on both ends, right? There have been proponents for the drivers end and there have been proponents for the businesses end as well. So you saw how the court has issued 3 criteria. If 3 criteria are satisfied, I mean, depending on the 3 criteria that were shown on the video, they decided on whether to treat an employee as a permanent, whether to treat a driver as a permanent employee of the company or as a contractor, right? So you see how this concept of the sharing economy has given birth to this kind of debate. So what the drivers also are saying, in one sense, it is justifiable, right? They are working full-time as drivers and they don't have any sort of safety net. But I mean, they are used to on the end of the company. They are arguing how they cannot classify them as permanent employees. I mean, how they cannot classify them as contractors. Depending on the situation. Right now, they say that these drivers are sometimes having a lot of flexibility, like they are using multiple platforms for rides, not only Uber. You saw Lyft. Now, Lyft is also a platform similar to Uber, where hailing of cabs and that sort of same mechanism as Uber is operationalizing. So these drivers, they used to work for both the platforms. So then how can we actually recognize them as our employees only, right? So if we are going to treat them as employees, fine, then take away the flexibility they have. They can only work for Uber and they have to work during the shifts that we ask them to work. But so you see how interesting this debate is being. So what you need to understand by this is that how the sharing economy has created these kinds of debates in different industries, in different work settings, right? So going back to our lesson, you can here see that the question is no longer about who is skilled or who is unskilled, right? It is about how to measure work, what constitutes as work, and also how can you recognize an employee, right? What constitutes employment? These kinds of questions are the ones that matter the most in this present era, right? So the next point says, establish tests to determine what constitutes employment may no longer hold in the sharing economy. Right? So like I mentioned, what we traditionally regarded as employment no longer can be regarded as employment today. Now, for instance, some time back, there were still cab drivers, right? There were cab drivers who had their own work, who used to, ride for some companies who were treated as contractors. and some of them did not come under any sort of surveillance, employment surveillance, right? They were independently working on their own. But now with the emergence of platforms like this, the need arises to recognize these people as employees as well. If they're working full time for it, and depending on many such criteria like that, which were also explained in the video. So the next point says, new labor definitions are needed for a world of crowd-based capitalism, right? We talked about these crowd-based platforms in the earlier lessons. We talked about crowdfunding and things like that. We talked about this term of crowd-based. So what does crowd-based mean? I hope you remember from our previous lessons. So at the heart of this word is, or let's say, the concept of crowd-based capitalism talks about the fact that it is a platform, right? A platform that takes responsibility for the aggregation of demand, right? By providing consumers with some search capabilities, discovering certain things that they want out of the platform, right? Maybe products and services, and they are typically providing trust or some risk-reducing services to both sides through these crowd-based platforms, right? So in the crowd-based capitalism or in these crowd-based networks, what happens is there is an exchange of, or there is a supply of capital, supply of assets, and there's a supply of labor, which originates in a decentralized manner, unlike a centralized institution or centralized capitalism. In crowd-based networks, or when you are crowdsourcing, right, within an economy, there is a decentralized set of individuals, right, a decentralized crowd, basically, which sort of comes together for sharing these kinds of elements, right? So this is very much different from aggregating or let's say assembling by a certain company or a government, so to speak, right? Not like a company putting together, or not like a company aggregating or assembling, right? When crowd-based networks operate, there are so many people who are taking part in economic activity, not just a single institution that creates, that works as the center of the that particular economic activity. A crowd-based capitalism in crowd-based network is essentially distributed, right? So now coming back to our point, right? When economies are working in this kind of a capitalism, new definitions for labor are definitely needed, right? However, this future has arrived well in advance of the policy needed to support it. That is very true. Although this future, or let's say, although these tendencies already started occurring in our economics, there is no strong enough, or there is no sufficient policy coverage that supports this kind of emerging future, or to support these kinds of dynamics, right? According to a study done in collaboration with Intuit by Steve King of Emergent Research, there were already 3 million on-demand workers in the United States alone in 2016. A number he projected was predicted to grow over 7 million by 2020. So you see what sort of exponential growth was predicted back then within just a very short period of time for these on-demand workers, right? On-demand workers, or workers in the gig economy, that provide or that supply their services, that supply their work based on the demand created by the customer, right? So that employee base has grown at a very large rate, a very rapid rate. This on-demand or so-called gig economy is creating exciting opportunities and unleashing innovation. Right? It's obvious, right? This kind of economic models are already creating opportunities, especially for the workforce. And also, we shouldn't forget the opportunities that it's creating for the, the customer end as well, right? It is also beneficial for the consumer end as well, right? Now, it creates opportunity for people to be able to get to products and services and experience new products and services that they would not have been able to afford in a traditional economic setting, right? So in the sharing economy, or in the so-called on-demand economy, right? It has basically started out in the first instance as a way for consumers to pay for temporarily accessing or to sharing products and services rather than buying or owning. Now, I remember explaining this to you earlier also. For a temporary period of time, for a certain period of time, people get access to a certain resource that they do not own, right? They do not have ownership of it. But rather than buying or rather than owning that sort of resource or that sort of service or a product, they have the privilege of getting access to this kind of assets or facilities provided by someone else, right? That is how this gig economy or the sharing economy works, like Airbnb and Uber, Lyft, all these things we have discussed about, right? So when we're operating in such a scenario, right, it's also raising hard questions about workplace protections and what a good job will look like in future, right? So in this gig economy, increasingly there are questions like in what happened in the Uber's case, right? There are some questions: how to create workplace protection, how to protect the employees, like what constitutes as employment, whom to consider as your employee, and what will a good job look like, what sort of skills or competencies are required for a job. So these things are increasingly getting ambiguous and having their own controversies. Platforms like Uber, Lyft, and TaskRabbit have created many opportunities in the future of work. Now, Uber and Lyft, I explained to you. This TaskRabbit is also a platform which is there for, facilitating basically freelance. I will just quickly share with you what the website of TaskRabbit looks like. Right, so take a look at this here. You can see this is the TaskRabbit's website, right? I have, so here you see a list of popular tasks, right? Freelancing work, both people who are able to offer services, right? Offer work, as well as people who require work to get done. Both customer end and the supplier end are getting a platform to meet each other through this TaskRabbit platform or the website, right? It essentially facilitates the freelance working. Now, if I consider furniture assembly, right? I need to get some of my furniture assembled in my house. So I can book a tasker to put together my furniture, right? So I can go here and book it, right? So here a list of services provided by these assembly services have been provided. So how does it work? I'm going to describe the task that needs to be done, and then I can choose a suitable tasker from a list of taskers, and I can easily get it done. And if I'm someone who wants to work in this platform, I can also become a tasker. So when you have time, do read these things and explore these things. There are very interesting concepts and interesting forms of work that have emerged. So obviously, platforms like this have created many opportunities in the future of work, like I just mentioned several minutes ago as well. But the problem is, what exactly do these opportunities look like, right? So when it comes to the types of the nature of opportunities that is created by this platform, there are arguments both for and against. There are some people who are proponents of these kinds of platforms, and also there are opponents, right? So on one side of the argument, there are those who may consider the future of work, at least as it is currently unfolding in the sharing economy, as near certain race to the bottom. So some of the people who actually are opponents of this concept of sharing economy and this gig economy and the platforms that facilitate that kind of economy, these people say that the future of work that is being created in this sharing economy, or the future of work that is being introduced due to this gig economy, is a near certain race to the bottom, that it can drive us towards a disadvantageous situation. It can cause adverse circumstances to economies, right? It can cause disadvantages to the people who are involved in such economies, right? So what does it mean? In this regard, it is argued that in this dystopian view of the future, work will be defined by low wages, elimination of benefits, and high levels of job insecurity. So there is some sort of truth in it as well, right? Because of these gig economies and because of these on-demand economies, what happens is people can tend to get paid lower. Low wages can be paid and people can be still employed in tasks. So there's a lot of information available, for instance, right? You cannot demand high rates of pay in an economy where you essentially know at what rate a particular product or service gets exchanged. The information is transparent and it's out there. And most of the times these are contract-based work, right? So therefore, there is a high tendency for these people to get lower wage rates, right? Then also certain benefits can be eliminated, like in the case of Uber that we saw. Now employees have an increased risk of being thrown away from a safety net. දැන් අපි සාමාන්‍ය ආයතනයක් ගත්තොත් එහෙම රැකවරණයක් තියෙනවා ආයතනයේ පැත්තෙන් සේවකයෙකුටනේ. රක්ෂණය පැත්තෙන් වෙන්න පුළුවන්, එයාට හම්බෙන අනිකුත් බෙනිෆිට්ස් පැත්තෙන් වෙන්න පුළුවන් නේ, විවිධ දීමනාතින් වෙන්න පුළුවන්. එහෙම නැත්නම් මොකක් හරි කරදරයක් වුණ අවස්ථාවකනේ, අසනීපයක් වුණ අවස්ථාවක වෙන්න පුළුවන්. රැකියා සුරක්ෂිතභාවය පැත්තෙන් පර්මනන්ට් එම්ප්ලොයිමන්ට් එක ගොඩක් ඉතින් ඉන්න හොඳයි. රැකියාවේ අපි සුරක්ෂිතභාවය පැත්තෙන් ගත්තම. නමුත් අර වගේ ෂෙයාරින් ඉකොනොමි එකක වැඩ කරන කෙනෙක්, Uber driver කෙනෙක් උදාහරණයකට, full time Uber වැඩ කරන Uber driver කෙනෙක්, දැන් pick me driver කෙනෙක්, right? full time මේ වගේ platform එක වැඩ කරන කෙනෙක්ට කොහෙන්ද රක්ෂණයක් තියෙන්නේ? කවුද එයාගේ employer? එයා platform එකකට වැඩ කරත් ඒ platform එකෙන් එයාව employer කෙනෙක් විදිහට consider කරන්නේ නැත්තම්, right? එයාට ලැබිය යුතු benefits ගොඩක් එයාගෙන් නැති වෙන්න පුළුවන්, right? සාමාන්‍ය employment contract එකකදී තියෙනවට වඩා දැන් එයාට එයාගේම වාහනේට කියන්නේ තෙල් ගහගන්න ඒවා, මේන්ටෙනන්ස් කරන ඒවා සහ වෙන අනිකුත් විය හැකි අනතුරු වලට එයා ඉන්ෂුරන්ස් කරන ඒවා වාහනේට, right? අලුත් වැඩියාවන් කරන හැම දෙයක්ම ඒවා ඔක්කොම ඩ්‍රයිවර් විසින් විඳ දරා ගන්න ඕන දේවල් නේ. නමුත් එයා එම්ප්ලොයී කෙනෙක් වුණොත් ඕකට යම්කිසි සහනයක් තියෙන්න පුළුවන්. There can be a benefits package, right? It's not just in the taxi service industry. Can be, it happens in a lot of industries, right? So this elimination of benefits has also become an issue. And high levels of job insecurity, like I mentioned earlier, you can be thrown away at any time, right? There's no hard and fast like binding contract between an employer and an employee in platforms like this, right? So the employer reserves the exclusive rights to terminate the employment in a contract-based agreement. Contract-based agreement එකකදී ඕන වෙලාවක employee ට ගෙදර යන්න කියලා, sorry, the contractor ට එළියට යන්න කියලා මේ කියන්න හැකියාව තියෙනවා. ඉතින් ඔය වගේ disadvantages තියෙනවා කියන එක තමයි කියන්නේ මේ sharing economy එකට විරුද්ධතාවය පළ කරන විරුද්ධ මතධාරී අදහස් තියෙන අය. Further, People will work longer hours for less money. Income will be fragmented. The safety net will be a distant memory, and work environments will have less ideal and less carefully monitored conditions. So, continuing on the same point, right? People will have to work longer hours, but still have to earn less money because it's not like working in a permanent place of employment, right? Then their income will be fragmented as well, right? But they earn is not just for themselves only, right? The income will be excessively fragmented. It will be distributed, right, among several parties. Then the safety net that they are getting will become lower and lower, as well as there will be a high amount of job insecurity as a result, right? So what is the job security, for example, that a Uber driver has? දැන් මේ දවස්වල හිතන්නකෝ crisis situation එකක් තියෙනවා ලංකාවේ. දැන් Uber driver කෙනෙක්ට එහෙම නැත්නම් pick me driver කෙනෙක්ට මේ වගේ අවස්ථාවක කිසියම් safety එකක් තියනවද company එක පැත්තේ? නැහැ, right? As long as they have the fuel, as long as their vehicle is working, they will be able to ride. But if they're not able to do that, there is no insurance or there is no safety net coming from the point of the company, right? And also the work conditions. දැන් අපි සාමාන්‍යයෙන් නම් ආයතනයක් ගත්තාම ඒ ආයතනයේ employees ලාව manage කරන්න human resource වෙනම unit එකක් තියෙනවා. එතකොට අපි කියනවා මේ occupational health and safety වගේ දේවල් ගැන ගොඩක් concern වෙනවා නේද? අපි employee ට වඩාත් හොඳ favorable working conditions තියෙන්න ඕනේ කියලා අපි කියනවා. ඒවට අනපනත් තියෙනවා වෙනම, right? employees ට වැඩ කිරීමට සුදුසු වැඩ පරිසරයක් සලසා දෙන්න බැඳිලා ඉන්නවා employer විසින්, right? දැන් ඒ උනට මේ වගේ situation එකකදී gig economy එහෙම නැත්නම් sharing economy එකකදී ඒ වගේ දෙයක් වෙන්නේ නැහැ. There is no such thing happening within the sharing economy, right? The work conditions of the workers, or let's say the surroundings that they have to work in and all that, their work environments are not monitored at all by the employers. So while the opponents of this kind of economy talks about things like this, there are also proponents of the sharing economy business model. So this slide says, on the other hand, there are sharing economy enthusiasts who see the future world of work as one defined by increased flexibility, fluidity, innovation, and creativity. Right? දැන් මේ sharing economy එකට පක්ෂපාත අදහස් දරන අය ඒගොල්ලන් කතා කරන්නේ මේ economic model එකේ තියෙන flexibility එක, fluidity එක, innovations, creativity. That's true, right? Now, for example, a person with a cab can very easily use the vehicle to earn income on multiple platforms. Pick me එකේ යාට රස්සාව කරන්නත් පුළුවන්, Uber එකේ රස්සාව කරන්නත් පුළුවන්, නැත්නම් යාට personally යන hires වල යාට ආදායමක් උපයන්න පුළුවන් හැකියාව තියෙනවා. flexibility එක තියෙනවා, fluidity එක, යාට different business models අතරේ හුවමාරු වීමේ හැකියාව යාට තියෙනවා. And also new innovations come, right? These platforms are constantly under innovation. New types of things get introduced, right? These platforms get more improved with these innovations. And also new types of platforms get introduced. Now, not just renting out your car and working as a driver. Now, several weeks ago, we talked about this platform called BlaBlaCar, where we showed you how carpooling has being activated as a business platform. නේ තමන්ට වාහනයක් තියෙනවා නම් තමන් කොහේ හරි ගමනක් යනවා නම් ඒ යන ගමන අතරතුරේ අපි තනියෙන් ඒ ගමන යන්නේ නැතුව තව කීප දෙනෙකුත් වාහනයට දාගෙන යනවා අපි යන රූට් එකෙම යන්න පුළුවන් අයට. ඉතින් එයාලා ඊට පස්සේ මොකද කරන්නේ මේ ඒ ගමන වෙනුවෙන් ඒ කාර් එකේ අයිතිකාරයාට යම්කිසි මුදලක් ගෙවනවා. So very innovative business models, right? And also very creative. Right? The ලංකාවේ මේ වගේ වාතාවරණයකට ගොඩක් සුදුසු වෙන business model එකක් තිබ්බනම් නේද? So there are constant innovations happening in these kinds of platforms. Therefore, in how service is delivered, right? How products are delivered and how it is consumed. What is the mode of revenue generation, right? Those kinds of things are getting very innovative and creative. Now, for example, when Uber came, they only just offered rides. When PicMe came, they only offered rides. But now they have also improved to situations where they also offer certain facilities such as delivery of packages, not just people. If you have any documents to get delivered, if you have a present or any parcel or something like that to get delivered, and if you're unable to travel for some reason, you can get a vehicle, you can hire a vehicle to deliver it for you, right? So, and also food, right? It has developed across platforms. Uber Eats is there, PicMe Food is there, right? Things like that. And also not just in this scenario, it has happened across many different industries as well, if you really research into them. So the second point, in this utopian future, that means in this perfect future that we assume, individuals will be empowered entrepreneurs who take control of their own destinies on an unprecedented scale. So in these kinds of economies, we have control on ourselves. Nobody is ruling us, nobody is governing us, nobody is telling us what to do, right? For example, if I take the same example so that it's clearer to you, in the case of Uber or PicMe, now there are certain regulations, right? There are certain conditions that are governing these people, but also you can be your own boss by being flexible across platforms. And also forget the this traveling industry, right? Now, in that platform like TaskRabbit that I showed you earlier, in that kind of platform, you can be an entrepreneur by providing services to someone, right? If someone is looking to assemble furniture, and if you are a good carpenter, right, there will be nothing to worry about. You can list yourself as an entrepreneur in a platform like that, and you can easily provide that service. And also these kinds of platform-based economies are actually empowering entrepreneurs as well, right? දැන් අපි මේ AliExpress වගේ platforms ගැන කතා කරන උදාහරණයකට. ඉතින් entrepreneurs ලාට ගොඩක් හොඳ platforms වෙනවා මේවා. එයාලාගේ destiny එක, එයාලාගේ ගමන එයාලට වඩාත් පහසු කර ගැනීම සඳහා, right? Then innovative new products and services will flow from platforms that are gateways to innovation, or as finishing schools for entrepreneurs. So, like I mentioned earlier, new forms of innovative products and services will emerge from these kinds of platforms, right? Sharing economy platforms that we talked about. We actually shared with you some examples on this platform-based economy, some sharing economies as well several weeks ago. So refresh your memory on that. So in platforms like this, innovations happen constantly. These products and services get constant improvement, right? So it can either have the benefit of leading towards more innovations, or it can also act as finishing schools for entrepreneurs. That means it can also lead to certain scenarios where the platform itself acts like a school for entrepreneurs, for people who want to maybe create a business, people who want to know on how to earn money, right? People who need that kind of knowledge and skills and experience can work in these kinds of platforms, right? And these platforms itself will act as a a platform that provides learning opportunities for entrepreneurs, right? They can learn a lot by being involved in this platform. So the proponents of this sharing economy also point this out as an advantage, right? Then the next point, average workers will work fewer hours on a more flexible schedule from wherever they want and make more money doing work that they choose. So people who work in these platforms can choose to work for fewer hours if they want, not like a 8 to 5 job or 9 to 5 job. There's no hard and fast rule. They can work for fewer hours and can be more flexible, right? They can they can have their own freedom. They can work when they feel like working, not like a fixed job. And also they can work from wherever they want also in certain cases, right? For example, in that kind of a freelancing platform, sometimes let's say you're a content writer, or let's say you're a music producer, you're a designer. You can work from wherever you want because these platforms are essentially activated in an online mode, right? And make more money doing the work that they choose. You can do what you like. You can do work the number of hours that you like, and also you can make money while doing like that, right? Stephanie Casriel, the CEO of the labor platform Upwork, explained the draw of making a living on demand at a September 2015 World Economic Forum panel, right? So this labor platform Upwork is also an interesting platform. I will share that with you. Also, the kind of a freelancing work promoting platform, right? Now, if you look at this, you'll see here. See how you can find talent, right? Post job and you can hire a pro, that means hire a talented person. You can browse and buy certain projects if you want, right? There's logo designing, articles and blog posts, WordPress, not just working with hands, right? Even services, all these are services, right? පොටුවක ඉඳගෙන කරන්න පුළුවන් විදිහේ jobs මේවනේ. physically ගිහිල්ලා අපිට තැනකට කරන්න ඕනේ වැඩ නෙමෙයි හැම අවස්ථාවකදීම. Social media marketing, video editing, search engine optimization, right? So there are so many options. So do take a look at these kinds of platforms and what they offer, how they work, right? All these things, please explore more, because these are the things that you need to be equipped with in terms of knowledge, right? As the undergraduates of 21st century, in a rapidly digitalizing age, you have to be able to explore these things and add more and more to your knowledge book, not just what is being taught in the classroom, right? So do explore these platforms and see. So what does the CEO of this Upwork platform talk about? What does Stephanie talk about? The younger generation really aspires for this kind of careers in platform-based economies, that means, right? They don't want the 9-to-5 job, working with the same employer, needing to be on premise. They like flexibility, they like independence and the control they have. Is that true? So we have to ask from you. So you are also the younger generation in a platform-based who have high opportunity of contributing to this kind of platform-based economics. So do you like working 9-to-5 jobs, working with the same employer, working with the same boss, the same office, have to be always physically be present in the office, and which has limited flexibility? You cannot take off when you want, you cannot be free when you want, right? So you cannot start and finish when you want. So the younger generation essentially likes jobs that are very much opposite to these kinds of characteristics, right? So they like independence, they like being able to control their own future. So the platform-based economies like this present them with that opportunity, right? So then what is better? What is better? Of course, both camps will eventually be right to some degree. So there is no complete, we cannot completely disregard what the opponents of the platform-based economy say, right? There is also some sort of truth in what they are speaking about, but also on the other end as well. Neither the doomsday predictions nor utopian projections will likely ever be fully realized, right? We cannot say that the platform-based economy will fully be detrimental or disadvantageous, so that it will only drag us towards the bottom. No. Also, we cannot 100% say that it's a fully perfect economy with every condition that is leading us towards a better future. That also we cannot fully accept, right? So whether or not the sharing economy proves detrimental or empowering to workers in the long term, right? Whether we see empowered entrepreneurs or disenfranchised drones, that means whether, to decide whether the sharing economy makes workers more empowered all the time, or whether it, gives rise to a lot of silenced opinions, right? Or whether it does not promote any new ideas, or it does not, it gives rise to failed ideas, right? How to decide this thing is actually depending on a number of factors, right? So in the rest of this lecture, we are going to look at that kind of factors. Those could include factors that businesses, workers, and consumers will determine to varying degrees. Right? එතකොට මේ sharing economy එක හැමතිස්සෙම පුද්ගලයන්ව empower කරන, ඒගොල්ලන්ව බලගන්වන platform එකක්ද දීර්ඝ කාලීනව. එහෙම නැත්නම් මේ වගේ sharing economies නිසා අසාර්ථකත්වයට පත් වෙන, එහෙම නැත්නම් ගොඩක් අපි කියන successful වෙන්නේ නැති opinions වලට ද ගොඩක් වෙලාවට මේ sharing economy එක අපිව lead කරන්නේ. එහෙම නැත්නම් ගොඩක් වෙලාවට අසාර්ථක වෙන විදිහේ business models වලටද මේ sharing economy එක හරහා අපිව වඩාත් ඇදිලා යන්නේ කියන කාරණේ රඳා පවතිනවා ව්‍යාපාර විසින්. එහෙම නැත්නම් අපි කියනවා විවිධ කාර්යවල නිරත වෙන පුද්ගලයන්, කියන්නේ employeesලා විසින්, එහෙම නැත්නම් workersලා විසින්, වැඩ කරන ජනතාව විසින්, එහෙම නැත්නම් පාරිභෝගිකයන් විසින් තීරණය කරනු ලබන කාරණාවන් ගණනාවක් මත. ඒ වගේම මේ කියන කාරණා, right, also that will be shaped by policy choices. මේ කියන තීරණයන් තවදුරටත් legal aspects, එහෙම නැත්නම් කියන නෛතික රාමුවක් මත, එහෙම නැත්නම් government regulations, මේ රජයේ ප්‍රතිපත්ති මත මේවා ගොඩක් වෙලාවට shape වෙන්න, වෙනස් වෙන්න පුළුවන්. So choices we make over the coming decade, and that will be explored at length in this chapter. එතන මොනවද මේ කියන කාරණා? එක මේ economy එක, එහෙම නැත්නම් මේ ආර්ථිකයට කොටස්කරුවන් වන විවිධ පාර්ශ්වයන් විසින් තීරණය කළ හැකි, එහෙම නැත්නම් ඒගොල්ලන්ට බලපාන විවිධාකාරයේ කරුණු කාරණා මත, right, මේ කියන හොඳද නරකද කියන කාරණේ depend වෙනවා. ඒ වගේම විවිධ policy decisions මත මේ කියන කාරණා depend වෙනවා. එන ඉදිරි දශකය ඇතුළත ඒවා ගොඩක් විට ඒ කියන කරුණු කාරණා මත වෙනස් වෙන්න පුළුවන් වෙයි කියන එක ගැන තමයි මේ point එකෙන් කතා කරන්නේ. So we will be exploring such things at length in this particular chapter. It seems likely that the sharing economy will convert some of what is corporate and government employment today into different forms of flexible and freelance work. So there's a possibility that this fixed nature works in the corporate sector or in the government sector will transform into more flexible work patterns and more freelance work that we talked about earlier. In the future, it is a possibility. It is a possibility. Now, in the present also, in Sri Lanka, there are some sort of discussions going on how to remove the government sector employment, right? But that's a different story. But there will be a possibility where this work gets gradually reduced and people will gradually get, distributed among freelance or flexible forms of work. In order to understand what sectors might see a greater level of labor transition due to this wave of digital disruption, and why, ඒතර කොහොමද අපි decide කරන්නේ මොන වගේ ශ්‍රමයද, එහෙම නැත්නම් මොන වගේ jobs ද වැඩිපුරම transition එකකට, වැඩිපුරම වෙනස් වීමකට භාජනය විය හැක්කේ මේ කියන digital disruption එක නිසා. සහ එහෙම වෙන්නේ ඇයි කියන එක අපි තීරණය කරන්න නම්, it is first helpful to link the transition to on-demand work with two other narratives that have dominated the discussions about labor technology over the last couple of decades. So in order to decide that, in order to decide what kinds of jobs are more suitable, or what kind of jobs will experience the most amount of transition due to these digital disruptions, we have to first have a good idea about two important concepts that we talk about in on-demand work settings or in platform-based or gig economy settings. So what are these two concepts that have gained popularity in the last 10 years? Last couple of decades, actually, not 10 years. So one is this concept of offshoring, right? Since 1990s, there has been a significant growth in the prevalence of offshoring, right? So offshoring is one such prominent concept which gives rise to deciding on what kind of labor has experienced the most amount of change and what kind of labor or work will continue to experience change in the future. And also the other one is, more recently, there has been a persistent focus on, and in some cases, panic about digitally induced automation. The other concept is this digitally induced automation. So the concept of offshoring, the first one, and the concept of automation, digitally induced automation. So these two concepts themselves, it is being overly predicted that will cause greater changes in work settings and the very nature of work, right? So sometimes there have been a lot of enthusiasm about these concepts, and also sometimes there have been situations where people are afraid or panicked about these kinds of concepts. So let's look at how they are shaping the nature of work in the forthcoming slides. Right. First, let's take a look at the concept of offshoring. Maybe you have already heard of this concept, maybe in some other modules that you have learned, or maybe you already heard of this from somewhere else, because offshoring has become a way of working since some time back now, right? So what does offshoring talk about? Offshoring refers to the practice of a company using an internal labor force that lives in a country different from where the company is located. යම් කිසි country එකක යම් කිසි ව්‍යාපාර ආයතනයක්, right? ඒ ව්‍යාපාර ආයතනයේ බේස් වෙලා තියෙන, නැත්නම් ඒ ව්‍යාපාර ආයතනයේ පදනම් වෙලා තියෙන රට හැර, right? වෙනත් රටක එහෙම නැත්නම් වෙනත් ප්‍රදේශයක ඒ ව්‍යාපාර ආයතනයේම සිටින employees ලා එහෙම නැත්නම් ඒ ව්‍යාපාර ආයතනයේටම අයිති employees ලා වෘත්තිකයන් වෙනත් ඒ ආයතනයේ පිහිටා තිබෙන ප්‍රදේශය හැර වෙනත් ප්‍රදේශයක, උදාහරණයක් වෙනත් රටක වගේ තැනක employ කරනවා නම්, right? ඒ වගේ තැනක ඒ වගේ ආයතනයට අයත් වෘත්තිකයන් ගේ සේවය අපි ලබා ගන්නවා නම් කම්පැනි එක පිහිටා තිබෙන තැන හැර වෙනත් තැනක, ඒ වගේ අවස්ථාවකට අපි කියනවා offshoring. Over the past few decades, a growing number of jobs have been offshored, right? So there has been an increased tendency for jobs to be offshored in the past. Often, the motivation for offshoring is to lower costs. Sometimes it is also to tap into a new pool of talent. Now, usually when this offshoring happens, there is a cost advantage for the business organization, especially in cases like, this outsourcing labor to countries where the labor is cheaper, to countries like China or Taiwan, right? Then mobile phone assemblies ගොඩක් වෙනවානේ China and Taiwan වගේ රටවල. The iPhone, biggest iPhone factory that was situated in China. So there were a lot of legal cases also happening there due to employment of child labor and all that. If you remember, I don't know whether you remember that kind of cases. So a lot of such things have happened, right? So to lower costs. Not even that, even in the software industry, we see that where a lot of work in the States or in European countries offshored into labor in India, places like India, right? Where the labor wage rate is considerably lower, but also these Indian employees are a part of the company, a part of the internal employees of the US-based or European-based companies, right? And also, there's the advantage of being able to tap into a new pool of talent, right? Not just based in one geographical area, you get access to a diverse workforce. You get access to working with people from all over the world, and also maybe in countries where there are better literacy rate than your country, a better pool of talent than your country, right? Then furthermore, there are sometimes tax advantages to offshoring. So rather than when basing the company in your own country, when you are offshoring, you may be able to get the same work done or the same services done, same work can get gotten fulfilled at considerably lower tax rates, right? So tax advantages might be there. But also the regulatory ambiguity that occurs when slotting sharing economy work into existing categories, right? When you're trying to classify the sharing economy work, the nature of work done in a sharing economy into existing definitions of work or into existing categories of work, there it can lead to analogous tax compliance and enforcement gaps of sharing economy platforms, right? Now, earlier also we talked about how there are certain ambiguities about how to really define or to understand or to identify sharing economy work. So due to these issues, also there are certain regulatory ambiguities, right? On considering tax compliance and how to earn tax, how to enforcement tax laws, and also sometimes in enforcing certain laws related to laborers, there might be certain ambiguities in the regulatory setting. For many reasons, it is hard to find accurate numbers capturing the exact magnitude of offshoring. Also, there are issues when understanding what is the exact extent to which a company has offshored, because the work has become increasingly very much fragmented and very much sometimes difficult to detect due to some reason, right? And also you cannot really measure the scale at which we have really offshored our work as a company, right? So some of these reasons shed light on comparable measurement challenges we can expect as the sharing economy grows. So some of these reasons that we talked about earlier can inform us, right? Or can provide us information on comparable measurement challenges that we can expect as the sharing economy grows. So due to these ambiguities and the reasons that we talked about earlier, we can understand certain challenges that we might come across as this sharing economy grows in terms of measuring employment, measuring certain or enforcing certain labor laws, right? And measuring certain, let's say, economic kind of measures, right? So in terms of measuring certain traditional concepts that we were used to in labor markets, in our economy, in our workplace, we might come across challenges. දැන් අපි කොහොමද උදාහරණයකට අපේ ආයතනයේ නිරත වෘත්තිකයෙක්ව අපි හඳුනාගන්නේ කොහොමද? එයා අපේ ආයතනයේ වෘත්තිකයෙක් වෙන්නේ මොන හේතු මත පදනම් වෙලාද? මත යම්කිසි කෙනෙක් ආයතනයක් හෝ වේවා පුද්ගලෙක් හෝ වේවා එයා ටැක්ස් ගෙවන්න ඕනේ මොන වගේ කන්ඩිෂන්ස් මත පදනම් වෙලාද? එයා ඇත්තටම අපේ ඉන්කම් ටැක්ස් ගෙවන්න ඕන කෙනෙක් උදාහරණයක් විදියට. එයා අපේ එම්ප්ලොයි කෙනෙක් වෙනවද? එහෙනම් එයා ටැක්සබල් ඉන්කම් එකක් එයා උපයනවද? එහෙම නැත්නම් එහෙම නැත්ද? රයිට් මොන වගේ අවස්ථාවකදීද අපි ටැක්ස් ඩිඩක්ෂන්ස් වලට යන්න ඕන? එහෙම නැත්නම් legal enforcements කරනකොට අපිට කාට එරෙහිවද මේ යම්කිසි අපි කියනවා අකටයුත්තක් සිදු වුණොත් right යම්කිසි ප්‍රශ්නයකට මුහුණ දුන්නොත් අපිට මොන වගේ අවස්ථාවන් වලදීද නීතිය නෛතික ක්‍රියාමාර්ග ගන්න පුළුවන් එහෙමනම් මොන වගේ නීතියක්ද යටතේද ඒ කියන ආයතනය හෝ ඒ කියන පුද්ගලයා හෝ ගවර්න් වෙන්නේ නැත්නම් මොන වගේ tax compliances වලටද ඒ කියන ආයතනය හෝ ඒ කියන පුද්ගලයා අයිති වෙන්නේ right එතකොට යම්කිසි වරදක් සිද්ධ වුණොත් ඒ වැරද්දේ වගකීම ඇත්තටම බාර ගන්න ඕනේ කොයි පාර්ශවයේද right දැන් ඔය රටවල් කිහිපයක් අතරතුරේ වැඩ කරද්දි ගොඩක් වෙලාවට මේ වගේ ප්‍රශ්න එන්න පුළුවන්. ඇත්තටම යාපේ එම්ප්ලොයි කෙනෙක්ද එම්ප්ලොයි කෙනෙක්ද කියන එක තීරණය කිරීම මතත් සමහර විට මේ වගේ වගකීම් කාගේ වගකීමක් බවටද පත් වෙන්නේ කියන එක ගැන ගොඩක් ලොකු ambiguities තියෙන්න පුළුවන්. Right? And also there could be a lot of other measurement challenges, right? Then while some jobs can be tracked, for example, full-time credit card call center positions relocated from the United States to India, right? So some jobs can be tracked very easily, right? Call center employees la keepayak call center station එකක් අපි දානවා call center එකක් United States company එකක් India වල දානවා call center operation එකක්. ඒතකොට ඒක පහසුවෙන් track කර ගැනීම හැකියාව තියෙනවා employment ඒ services. Also, other jobs are more difficult to track because it is not jobs per se, but rather specific components that are being offshored. So some jobs are not just, jobs with a clear definition or jobs as we used to call jobs in the traditional setting, but rather only certain parts of jobs have been offshore. Not a full job, but only certain elements of jobs only have been offshore. For example, as work itself changes and is increasingly fragmented into hundreds of tasks that are staffed on platforms like Upwork and Fiverr, it is nearly impossible to measure what percentage of work in question is being offshore. When you are now using these platforms like Upwork that we talked about earlier and also Fiverr, right? What happens is, now Fiverr is sometimes you may not have heard of Fiverr. Fiverr is a online marketplace, an Israel-based online marketplace, once again for freelancing services, right? So the Fiverr serves to, or Fiverr offers listing and also to apply for small jobs or one-off jobs. We call them gigs, right? Just one-off or on-demand jobs online. So when this kind of jobs, when this kind of parts of work are being increasingly fulfilled over platforms like this, it's very impossible to measure what percentage of work is being offshore. This is also a measurement challenge that we talked about here, right? Now, sometimes one challenge is how to track the job and how to measure what component or what part of the job is actually outsourced, right? Now, for example, in a large digital marketing assignment, right, there might be one component of the work where one component is offshore in the sense of designing, sometimes in the form of content creation, sometimes in the form of user interface designing, right, sometimes in the form of user experience designing, or sometimes in the form of a development kind of job. There could be many, sometimes in the form of customer service, right? So small fragments or small components of work being offshore. It's very difficult to measure what component or what amount of work is actually offshore, right? Thus, only some jobs have the ability to be offshore. Also, highly offshoreable jobs only account for a small fraction of the US job market. Now, since we are basing this study in the United States, that is why United States job market has been stated here. So not all jobs can be offshore. Not all the jobs that you can think of can obviously be offshore, right? It's not possible. Also, at the same time, jobs that have the nature of being highly offshoreable. අපිට ගොඩක්ම offshore කරන්න බෑ හැම වර්ගයේම රැකියාව. නමුත් offshore කරන්න ඉතාමත් පහසු ආකාරයේ රැකියාවන් වෘත්තියන් ඇත්තටම job market එකේ ඉතාම කුඩා ප්‍රමාණයක් විතරයි represent කරන්නේ කියන කාරණයක් මෙතෙන්දී අපි මතු කරගන්න ඕන. Right? So moving ahead, it is viewed that offshoring represents a new era of work that has not yet reached its peak. So that is true, right? That can be very true. Offshoring is not something that we have fully utilized the potentials of. There can be further improvements and expansions, further changes, further innovations that happen in this nature of work that happens with offshoring, right? Just as earlier generations witnessed a move from agriculture to manufacturing and later from manufacturing to services, we are now in an epoch where at least some types of work are no longer location bound. Now, earlier days, we experienced shifts, right? First of all, there was barter systems, there was agriculture happening, there was manufacturing happening with the industrial revolutions. And from the industrial revolution, manufacture-based work, we moved to service-centered work settings. That a lot of the popularity of services is being increasing in the modern world. So now we have come to an era where some work is no longer bound by a location. You can fully work without worrying about where you work from, right? So the future question of work is not how, let's say, not where and when the work gets done. අපි වැඩ කරන වෙලාව හෝ වැඩ කරන ස්ථානය නෙමෙයි අනාගතයේදී වැදගත් වෙන්නේ. It is the nature of work that is being done, or how it is being done is what matters. එහෙනම් මොන විදිහේ වැඩද අපිට කරන්න පුළුවන්, මොන ආකාරයකද කියන එක තමයි වඩාත් වැදගත් වෙන්නේ, වැඩ කරන ස්ථානය හෝ වෙලාව නෙමෙයි. Right? So while manufacturing jobs were already being offshored decades ago, right? අපි දැන් ගොඩක් අහලා තියෙන්නේ manufacturing එහෙම නැත්නම් නිෂ්පාදන ක්ෂේත්‍රයේ රැකියා ගොඩක් විට මේ offshoring කියන concept එකට භාජනය වෙනවා කියන එක අපි අහලා තියෙනවා ගොඩක් විට නේ. We are now witnessing the offshoring of a new category of jobs, service industry job. අපේ ආයතනයේ වැඩ කරන employees physically එහෙම නැත්නම් manufacturing settings වල වෙනත් රටවල් වල හෝ වෙනත් ප්‍රදේශවල වැඩ කරන අවස්ථා ගැන අපි ගොඩක් අහලා තියෙනවා. Factories assembling products, for example, right? Assembling work is a lot of the time offshored to some other countries where the labor is considerably cheaper. But also, this has now shifted towards the service industry, where service industry workers who are doing service industry jobs also get involved in this market for offshoring as well, right? So, what factors govern this movement? This movement is driven by 3 factors, according to this. What are the 3 factors? The development of digital platforms that enable companies to recruit and monitor workers around the world. So one factor is the development of these digital platforms, like, for example, Uber or PickMe, AliExpress or Daraz in Sri Lanka, or Fiverr, Upwork, TaskRabbit, a lot of digital platforms that provide the companies the ability to recruit and monitor workers from around the world. Now, for example, I can be working on this Fiverr, or I can be working on Upwork, right? No matter where my country is from. If I'm a good designer, right? If I'm a good content developer, then I can opt myself, or I can list myself on Fiverr or in Upwork that I'm willing to work. If someone needs to get some content designed by me, they will book me. So the companies have, such platforms owned by companies, for instance, have a control, can have a control over me as a worker sometimes, right? And then work can be monitored around the world, right? Around the world. Now, some platforms, while there is no particular owner, right, or they are just third-party platforms, but also there are instances where these platforms are owned by certain companies, and these people who are working on these platforms become their workers. Then the second factor is, so what are these factors we are talking about? What type of work can be offshored, and also how it happens, right? And what types of factors govern this movement. So the first one you talked about, development of digital platforms, right? Why this movement towards offshoring is activated. One thing is these digital platforms. And the second thing is technological changes that enable workers to serve customers in any location. Now, customer service, which is a very important element of any organization. So customer service has changed to a scenario where you no longer have to be based in the same location where the product or the service is. It is a necessity sometimes, but also customer service can be offered from all over the world, right? For example, in a US-based company operating in an online platform, online ordering happens, let's assume. So there is there are employees of USA based in India who are offering services to this US-based company via online platforms. When customers from all around the world are ordering products, let's say apparel, right? They are ordering clothing from this website owned by the US company. But US company also has their employees or workers in India, and the Indian customer service representatives are essentially offering customer service to maybe a customer from France or Germany or even US itself, right? So no longer workers have to be stationed in one particular location. They can be from anywhere all around the world. And the entry of highly populated countries, including India and China, into the global economy. So due to this, the workforce has changed largely, right? And there are a lot of opportunities that companies in other countries can get by tapping into these large economies or these large labor markets like India and China, right? So they have entered the global economy and they have a workforce that is ready to work for any country in the world, right? So these highly populated countries are often being selected as destinations of offshoring, right? So this offshoring, therefore, is driven by these three factors that we talked about. Then also moving forward, an interesting thing for us to take note of is, it's important to bear in mind that only some forms of service work lend themselves to offshoring. Not now, earlier also we talked about the fact that all types of work are not suitable for offshoring. දැන් අපි කතා කරා තවදුරටත් manufacturing එහෙම නැත්නම් නිෂ්පාදන ශාස්ත්‍රය විතරක් නෙවෙයි, සේවා ශාස්ත්‍රයේ අපි මේ offshoring කියන ලක්ෂණය අපි දකින්න ලැබෙනවා. නමුත් සේවා ශාස්ත්‍රයේ සියලුම ආකාරයේ කර්තව්‍යයන් අපිට offshoring ඔස්සේ fulfill කරගන්න බෑ. right? හැමතිස්සෙම හැම විදිහකම වැඩ සුදුසු වෙන්නේ නැහැ offshoring වලට. right? Give me 1 second. Right. Sorry about the interruption. So based on this scenario, we identify two different types of services that can be observed in terms of this offshoring concept. One is personally delivered or just personal work, right? Or personal type of services. Second one is impersonally delivered or just impersonal services, right? So what does it mean? Personally delivered means, to simply put, it requires the physical presence of the service provider. To personally deliver a service, the physical presence of the provider is required. මේ personally delivered කියන service category එකේදී අපි අත්‍යවශ්‍ය වෙනවා මේ සේවාව සපයන පුද්ගලයා එහෙම නැත්නම් මේ සේවාව වෙනත් කෙනෙකුට ලබා දෙන පුද්ගලයා භෞතිකව ඒ ස්ථානයේ ඉඳීම අවශ්‍ය වෙනවා. Right? Impersonally delivered services, they can be provided from anywhere. Right? They can be provided from anywhere. Now, these types of impersonally delivered services, they are capable of being provided without causing any degradation to the quality of the service, right? From a distance, means from electronically, they can be delivered, right? Personally delivered services cannot be done like that. Now, for example, the first category encompasses a bewildering variety of jobs ranging from janitors and childcare workers. Now, in order to clean a building, right, the janitor has to be physically present there, right? To take care of the child worker has to be physically present there. And also to surgeons and CEOs on the high wage end. To be a surgeon, in order to perform the operation, you have to be there near the patient. Now, one can argue that there are concepts like telemedicine happening, right? There are concepts where CEOs are like global CEOs are there, where they can govern multiple countries. Now, this is the interesting point of it. There are certain increasing ambiguities offering in these areas as well, right? Now, although we say that these personally delivered jobs are, it can happen in low skilled kind of work as well as high skilled kind of services as well. Now, increasingly, the tendency is towards this work becoming more and more impersonal as time passes, right? When more and more innovations happen, this work tends to get more and more impersonal, right? Then similarly, the second category, that is the impersonally delivered service category, includes both low-end jobs like call center operators and high-end jobs like scientists, right? Now, for call center operators, they don't have to be physically present to provide the service, like in the example that I mentioned earlier. And also, even a high-skilled, high-end paying job like scientists, like they can contribute to a project from anywhere in the country. Scientists from multiple countries can work on the same project, right? So that is how the nature of work that can happen on these offshore platforms can work, right? What is key is to focus not on a job skill or the educational credentials required to do the job, right? So the skill level of an employee or the number of exams they have passed or the number of qualifications they have achieved is no longer important, but rather what is important is whether the service in question can be delivered electronically over long distances without compromising quality. What really matters in this concept of offshoring is not the skill or the credential of the person working, but whether the work or whether the service can be delivered without causing a damage to the quality that is expected out of that job, and whether that can be done from anywhere, even at a long distance, by using electronic modes, right? තවදුරටත් මේ offshoring වගේ concepts වල ආගමනයත් එක්ක වැදගත් වෙන කාරණාව මේ වැඩ කරන කෙනාගේ qualification එක ඔයාගේ skill එක නෙමෙයි. වඩා වැදගත් වෙන ප්‍රශ්නේ වෙන්නේ ඕනම තැනකින්නම් මේ කියන service එක provide කරන්න පුළුවන්ද? විද්‍යුත් මාධ්‍ය පාවිච්චි කරලා මේ service එක provide කරන්න පුළුවන්ද? සහ මේ සර්විස් එක එහෙම ප්‍රොවයිඩ් කරනකොට ඒ සර්විස් එකේ තියෙන ගුණත්වයට හානියක් නොවි මේක ඩිලිවර් කරන්න පුළුවන්ද කියන කාරණා තමයි වඩාත් වැදගත් වෙන්නේ sharing economy එකක. In other words, offshoring may be both less widespread and more universal than often assumed. ඒ කියන්නේ අනෙක් විදිහට අපි හිතුවොත් අපි හිතනවට වඩා ඇත්තටම offshoring කියන concept එක පුළුල්ව පැතිරෙලා නැහැ. ඒ වගේම තමයි offshoring කියන concept එක ගොඩක් අපි හිතනට වඩා ලෝකෙ පුරාම ව්‍යාප්ත විය හැකි සහ ව්‍යාප්ත වෙලා තියෙන concept එකක්. Right? It is also assumed that it is possible that offshoring is only a way station on the road to automation. Also, another assumption is that offshoring is just one stop along the way towards automation. So automation is what we are going to discuss next. Automation is once again a concept which has given rise to certain challenges and ambiguities in the nature of work in the sharing economy, and it has created some given birth to some interesting circumstances. So let's look at that next.